What are the commonalities among leaders who sustain excellence over an extended period of time?
Melissa, it's so great to have you here on the Learning Leader Show. Welcome.
Hi, Ryan. Thanks so much for having me.
So I was thinking of a number of different places to start, but one of them that I just couldn't help but laugh. It may surprise you a little bit. So I was searching all over the internet to do my research like I normally would. And I go to LinkedIn and your about section is the shortest of all time. It says, quote, apparently I'm a cult leader now.
Yeah.
Can you share more about that?
I think it was a CNN article, or it might have been an MSNBC article that framed the headline as like Melissa Urban, leader of like the cult diet favorite Whole30. And those headlines are always designed to be attention grabbing, kind of clickbaity, but I thought that was a really good one. So I just decided to adopt it and run with it.
Do you feel like Whole30 is a cult?
I don't think so, because we very much encourage people to think for themselves and to use the program as a template, as a framework, right? You're not supposed to eat Whole30 forever. It's designed as a self-experiment to kick off what we call your lifetime of food freedom. You feeling empowered around your own food choices and making the right food choices for you. So I wouldn't think of Whole30 as a cult, but much like any program where people join and feel an immediate sense of community and get incredible results, kind of like with CrossFit, people naturally want to talk about it all the time, and they can become big like proselytizers of the program. So maybe that lends a little bit to like the cult reputation.
Well, I really like this idea of self-experimentation. I feel like learning leaders, the leaders who are constantly working on themselves, are regularly running experiments, whether it's how to run a meeting or new hiring practices. And certainly the most important part, that's why I say, because I'm a big into working out, eating healthy, and that's why your stuff has really helped me and my family a lot. And that's why I wanted to talk to you. But because I say, like, we give all this advice on your career and your business and how to progress. But if you don't take care of yourself, your body, both physically and mentally, you can just throw out the rest of the advice. It doesn't matter. And so that's why I feel like it all starts with this. It starts here. And I sense you have a really keen eye and understanding of that.
I think that it does. I've been running the Whole30 for 12 years. It's been around since 2009. Millions of people have done the program. And what I've observed in my own life, but also in the millions of people who have done it, is that our relationship with food is incredibly foundational. And I often say that how you show up for the Whole30 is how you show up in other areas of your life. And what people find is they come to the Whole30 thinking it's a program about food, but it's not really about food at all. And what happens when you get into the program, when you really start to examine your habits, your emotional relationships with food, your boundaries or lack thereof around food or with others, what you gain from the Whole30 spills over into every single area of your life, not just the physical benefits like having more energy, sleeping better, or having a happier mood, but the sense of self-efficacy, self-confidence, how you show up in the world, the way it improves your relationships, the way it prompts you to take on other healthy habits in other parts of your life or start setting boundaries. We see it over and over and over again that people think they're signing up for a 30-day dietary self-experiment. And what they discovered is this really radical transformational life change in every area.
Why do you think it does that?
I think our relationship with food is so ingrained in us. And it is, again, as I mentioned, just really foundational to other relationships. We use food as comfort, we use food as reward, we use it as punishment, to self-soothe, to relieve anxiety. For many of us, our relationship with food goes back to childhood. It's what was modeled for us. It's the diet culture that's been beaten into our heads by the media and society and the patriarchy. It's what our parents modeled for us. If every time your parents fought, they bought you an ice cream, your relationship with ice cream is cemented from that point forward. And I think because of peer pressure, because of how societally available and acceptable it is to use food and alcohol in all of those ways, to numb, to relieve, to distract, to self-soothe, I think that we get very tied up in our relationship with food, and it can make us feel very disempowered. Diet culture teaches us that we're not connected to our bodies, that we can't trust our bodies, that less is more, that our worth and value are only, connected to that number on the scale, and it distances ourselves from ourselves such that we feel disempowered around food. We think we can't trust our own choices. And that kind of disempowerment and disconnection spills over into every area, understandably.
So you feel like Whole30 is the jumpstart program to help you take back some of that power? Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, it is. It really is. We are not Whole30 is not a weight loss program. It's not a diet. It's not a quick fix. It's not a detox. It's not a prescribed way of eating forever. Everyone says, every dietitian agrees that there's no one right size, one size fits all when it comes to nutrition, that everyone has to figure out what works for them. And then everyone goes, okay, yeah, that makes total sense. But how do I figure out what works for me? And what Whole30 does is provide the framework for how. How do you figure out which foods work best in your system and which ones perhaps you are sensitive to and have a negative reaction to? In the absence of the foods that you would normally use to self-soothe or distract or numb, what are some other coping tools that you can develop such that food and alcohol aren't your only go-to? What are your habits and how can you change those habits in the course of those 30 days? And how can our accountability and our community help you in making that, really big habit change?
One of the ways I feel like you've connected so well with people is that you at least appear to not have any fear to share your entire story. And there's a lot of stuff there. Drug addiction, rehab. I mean, a lot of stuff out there. Like, you lead with vulnerability. And I feel like that probably serves you really well, because when the leader goes first, it sets the tone, and that tone saying, like, this is the place where you can say these things because I'm willing to go first. I'm willing to kind of have the courage to go out farther than anybody else. And then I feel like once you've started doing that, others say, oh, Melissa has made it safe for me. Like, Melissa has shown that I can do this. And then others seem to follow suit. Can you share a little bit more about your backstory and then how you've had or built up the courage to share publicly a lot of things that I think most people would say, I'm just going to kind of put those in the closet. Like, no one needs to hear about all these past mistakes that I've made.
Yeah. I mean, when you have an Instagram post out there talking about that one time you got chlamydia, you get really comfortable really fast with, like, this is what I'm comfortable sharing.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you mentioned that, because the kind of tagline on my website is I'll go first.
Yeah.
I didn't always have a background in health and wellness. As you alluded to, for 5 years, I was an active drug addict from, college age into my early 20s. I'm now 21 years in recovery, but I wasn't always healthy. And I didn't always talk about my experience with addiction and recovery. But what I realized in the early days of Whole30 was that I was up, seemingly very healthy and fit, and had people in my audience that I was talking to about feeling out of control with food and feeling disempowered around food and feeling like you're stuck in that cycle of overconsumption and guilt and shame and hating yourself for it, and the isolation that brings, and that stress leading you to overconsume more. And I realized that people were looking at me going, what the hell does she know about what it's like to feel out of control? And my addiction was not around food, but I started sharing about my drug addiction because I wanted to let people in my community know that, like, I know what it feels like, because that cycle is no different when it comes to food or when it comes to drugs. So that was why I first started sharing. And what I realized in my own therapy and in my own self-work was that the more I shared, the more I felt better about my own experiences, the less shame and guilt I had, and the better I was able to process my own history and past in my own therapy and my own work. But then I also noticed that it gave people the freedom to come forward and say, like, yeah, I could use some help too, or that happened to me too, or I feel like that too. And I think one of the most powerful experiences is realizing that you're not alone. I think that so many of us feel alone in so many of these things, and hearing someone else have the freedom and feel so empowered to share such personal aspects of their life makes other people feel like, okay, I'm not alone. I'm not doing this by myself. And if I wanted to talk about it, I could when I'm ready.
How did you get the guts to do it? Because I think now looking back, you're like, oh yeah, I did it. And it's created this awesome kind of vulnerability loop where people are willing to share because I went first. But at the beginning stage, because there are people now thinking like, let's say they're running a business, or they're an SVP within a Fortune 50 company, and they maybe need to hear some of this, not even about the food, but just about the leadership aspect of it. It's hard to take that step. I don't discount the courage it takes. I felt that personally too. So how did you go from I don't want to do this to, okay, yes, I'm going to do this? Like, was there therapy? Was there a coach? Was it like, what was the process to make that happen?
There's always therapy. I've been in
Yeah.
therapy for the last like 25 years. I'm a
But
huge proponent. I love it. I talk about
one
it
thing
all the
about,
time.
don't have I read or seen pictures right that you use the term therapy loosely as well? Because sometimes therapy is like hiking in a mountain by yourself. Like, would you call that, or would you call that your church? I've heard
Yeah.
you or seen you
Yeah.
say, like, so maybe you can even compare and contrast those things as well, because I sense that as well. Like going on long solo walks is a big, like, I feel like that's kind of therapy, because there's a lot of reflection and thinking and sometimes note taking that happens throughout the course of, if you're going on like a 2-hour walk by yourself. So maybe you could share a combination of those things.
So yeah, I've done a ton of talk therapy through a variety of modalities. I've done somatic therapy. I've done the work of Byron Katie is a big part of my practice. I do go to church all the time, which is like me out by myself in the mountains, hiking and being in nature. I have a lot of practices that I feel like are contributing to my own personal development and growth. But I think the most important thing to note is that like I didn't come out of the gate guns blazing, like ripping open and being like, here's everything about me. You know, it started slowly. It was really scary. The first time I talked about my addiction and recovery, it was just a very simple blog post where I was like, hey, I want to share that this is part of my background. I wasn't even in a place yet where I could get in front of someone and start talking about it. I had to kind of write it down and create that distance. But what I came to realize was that I think in my addiction, when I was going through my addiction in the early stages of my recovery, I did relapse once after a year. I realized that part of that relapse was that I wasn't using my voice at all. You know, I wasn't telling people that I wasn't doing well or I wasn't okay. I wasn't setting any boundaries. I was always just fine. And because I wasn't sharing how I was feeling, it put me in a very precarious position and I ended up relapsing. So part of my own therapy and my own treatment was taking the ugly stuff and like putting it out into the light. And whether that meant just talking to my family about it or my best friend or my therapist, or eventually, you know, working it into my business, because it was such an organic part of who I was, and who I is still the business. That was a decision that was made, you know, slowly. I've come to it very gradually, very authentically. There are still a few kind of rules I have around what I do and don't share. So it's not like I'm a complete open book, but, you know, it's taken 10 years to get to the level of sharing that I'm at today. And it's happened slowly and not without more than a few vulnerability hangovers. That's for sure.
One interesting thing I read about you when it comes to self-care is you like to buy yourself flowers. Do you still do that? Is this a practice you still
Uh-huh.
are you have them
There's
right
like
there?
2 bouquets. There's one on my kitchen counter and one kind of behind me. Yeah. I buy
Oh,
myself flowers every week. Sometimes I send myself a flower delivery. Sometimes I just pick them up at like my local, you know, Sprouts or grocery store. They don't have to be fancy. But yeah, I always buy myself flowers. Always. There was a period of time where I was a single mom. I was recently divorced. I had a, you know, one-year-old baby, and I realized that like there was nobody going to buy them for me, and I absolutely deserve to have these pretty things in my house. So I started buying them for myself, and yeah, that's just a practice I've continued.
I love it.
Yeah.
You also talk about mindset, growth versus fixed. This is out there quite a bit. I've had Carol Dweck on the show, so we've talked deeply about, you know, with the person herself who's written the book on mindset. But I haven't actually talked about it on my podcast in a while. So I do think it's a worthy thing to discuss, since I know it's a part of you. Can you share the benefits of having a growth mindset versus a fixed one?
Yeah, I didn't know at the time when I was early in my recovery that the strategy I had employed was adopting a growth mindset. I didn't have the language for it yet.
Mhm.
But what I decided the second time around when I, realized I couldn't afford to relapse again is that I decided that I simply was a healthy person with healthy habits now. And I was going to frame every decision in my life around the question of would a healthy person with healthy habits do this? And I was going to look for evidence that I was in fact already this person. And
Mm.
it wasn't a conscientious, like strategic plan. It was really just me desperate to kind of save my own life and realize that I had to change everything if I wanted to maintain my recovery. But that's ultimately what I did. I looked for evidence that I was a healthy person with healthy habits. So I would get up and go to the gym in the morning, and it didn't matter what I did. The point was that, like, I got up and I showed up at the gym, and I would be in bed early, and it didn't matter that I wouldn't sleep well. The point is, I was in bed early and I made new like minded friends, and I started paying attention to what I ate. And that growth mindset, I think, was like a real key in maintaining my recovery, was not this idea that like someday I could be that person, but I already was. And how can I look for ways to shore up that mindset? And I talk about it often with people new to the Whole30 who are looking to make a radical change to their habits around food. How can you embrace the idea that you already are a healthy person with healthy habits and look for evidence in your everyday behaviors, not just with your diet, but with other factors to support that?
Let's talk about community. I feel like that's a big part. We've briefly talked about it. Some have called it a cult. Um, but I found the the building and being part of a community, and whatever, whether it's digitally, it's online, it's in person, it's both. I feel like you found something here when it comes to building a community and being part of one. Can you share more about maybe how you've done that, as well as why it's so important and why we shouldn't try to do these hard things alone?
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about the habit research that talks about how social support and accountability are so important for making big habit changes. But ultimately, what it comes down to is that we all feel like we want to belong to something bigger than ourselves. It's sort
Mhm.
of written into our DNA. And right now, we are more kind of physically distant than ever, never mind what's happened over the last year and a half with COVID. But, we feel like we're kind of connected to people because we see each other so much online and on social media, but that's not necessarily the kind of connection that we crave. And so, what I discovered with Whole30 is that, especially when people are going through something as scary and challenging as a dietary change, it's really helpful to have other people for resources, for accountability, to say, yeah, I'm going through that too, to answer each other's questions, to, be each other's cheerleaders or offer tough love when they need it. And I always say that at its heart, Whole30 is a community. Everything we do is in service of the community, and we don't make a business decision or take on a partner or run a campaign unless it is serving the people who are doing Whole30, the people who are currently in our community or who want to join. So it's at the heart of everything that I've ever done with Whole30.
For someone who has never heard of Whole30, what is Whole30?
I know, should we have started there? Maybe.
Probably. Now, I
It's
was thinking
okay.
now we're like 30 minutes in. Maybe I should have started there. But I sometimes, when you obviously know what it is, and I know what it is, and have done all that, but then I forgot, wait, someone's like, what's Whole30? So anyway, go
I
ahead.
know. I know. I don't run into too many people who haven't heard of it at this
Actually,
point,
they
but
do. Yeah. Yeah.
hopefully. So I already mentioned that Whole30 is not a weight loss diet, that it's not, any kind of like diet at all. We really consider it a self-experiment. So it's a 30-day reset for your health habits and relationship with food. And it's based on the framework of an elimination diet, which has been around since the 1920s and is considered the gold standard still for identifying food sensitivities. So the way it works is that for 30 days, you pull out commonly problematic foods that the scientific literature and our clinical experience show are very commonly problematic. You pull them out for 30 days and see what happens to your energy, your sleep, your digestion, your skin, your mood, your performance in the gym, your aches and pains. And then at the end of those 30 days, you'll add those foods back in one at a time, very carefully and systematically, like a scientific experiment, and see what changes. So
Hmm.
the idea is that by the end of the experiment, by the end of the elimination and reintroduction, you now have a really solid blueprint for which foods work best in your individual body and context.
So what are the things you initially take out?
So for the Whole30 elimination period, you're removing all forms of added sugar. So that's artificial sweeteners and any form of sugar. You're
And probably
eliminating.
can just keep that out forever. I
No,
mean, no.
I mean, not necessarily. No, that's the whole beauty of Whole30 is that if you add something back in and realize that it doesn't have a negative impact and you really love it and it adds to your quality of life, like go on with it. I've
Yeah.
got plenty of packages of Justin's peanut butter cups in my pantry right now.
Okay.
Because they give me joy. So you're pulling out alcohol for 30 days as well. You're pulling out grains, so breads and cereals and rice and quinoa, even your non-gluten grains. You're pulling out all forms of legumes, most forms, so beans, peanuts, and soy, and then most forms of dairy as well. Those are the food groups that are generally the most commonly problematic, and they're not bad in any way. We're just saying they might be problematic for you. So do this little experiment and figure out if they are.
And then you start introducing them one at a time
Yep.
back in. So it's not like, because I
Yep.
feel like initially when I heard about this, it was you remove those forever. And that's probably not sustainable to live like that for the rest of your life. You're just not going to do it. So
Yeah.
it doesn't seem realistic.
That's a super common misconception of the
Right.
Whole30. And I kind of want to be like, it's the Whole30, not the Whole365. But not only would it not be sustainable, it's also not necessary for
Yeah.
people to be in optimal health. I eat rice every single day. I eat oatmeal every single day. I love corn. I eat tons of popcorn. Like all of that stuff works super well in my system. So there's absolutely no reason for me to eliminate it, because now I've figured out that those do work well. There are certain things that I leave out all the time because I know that they don't work well for me. And that's just kind of my own unique context.
Some quotes that I pulled that I wanted to introduce back to you and have you expand on them if you're cool with it. And one of them, this is one that I've personally messed up and still do quite a bit. And that is, you cannot out exercise poor food choices and the resulting hormonal disruption. This is speaking directly to me because sometimes, it's like, I want the bad food, like pizza or whatever. And I'm like, I'm just going to kill myself in the gym. And okay, I'm good. Even though like I eat it and I feel bad. So like, how about the one for the person like me who is like, I'm just going to kill myself in the gym and then I'm going to go kill it in the kitchen too. What do you say to that quote?
Yeah. I mean, I think people often turn to exercise before they look at their diet because emotionally it's a little bit easier. It's a little
Right.
easier to
Oh,
get
it's
yourself into the gym every morning
way
and give up the
easier
stuff. Yeah.
than
Yeah.
like passing up tasty food that maybe is bad for me. Then I can go and go to the gym and just and really
Mhm.
hurt myself for a while, like in a good way, for a while and feel good at the end of that.
Yeah, and there's
Yeah.
definitely benefit to exercise. There absolutely is, of course. But, when you think about what you want to see from that fitness and from that recovery, and particularly the recovery aspect, that's where you actually get fitter. If your dietary foundation isn't supporting that exercise and that recovery well, then it's kind of like you're fueling your body and working really, really hard and just not getting as fit as you could or not seeing the results.
Mhm.
And if you're talking about it from kind of a behavioral change level or having an impact on your overall health and wellness, food plays a much bigger role than exercise. So I would much rather someone spend 30 days doing the Whole30 than 30 days in like the hardest boot camp ever, because I really think the results that you'll see with 30 days of changing the food you put on your plate are going to be far more profound than what you can see from exercise alone.
Another one, there is no food neutral. There is no food Switzerland. Every single thing you put in your mouth is either making you more healthy or less healthy.
That's so funny. That's from my first book. It starts with food. I wrote it in 2011 when I was so much more dogmatic. I was
Yeah.
so much more like everything was far more black and white, and I was so much more
Isn't it
sure
weird how
of
how like
myself.
you like grow up a little bit and you realize like you were less certain about things? Isn't that weird?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I think I've softened quite a bit too, and I've realized that like the rigidity back then really served me and the community that we were talking to. We were largely in the CrossFit community. They are very hardcore, very black and white. They get the tough love approach. That's not our audience now.
Yeah.
I I think to some extent you could probably say that that's true, right? Nothing is like completely neutral. This kombucha is making me like maybe a little healthier because it tastes delicious and it's got probiotics, and maybe the Justin's peanut butter cups are making me a little less healthy because of the sugar, but like I don't like to be so reductionist with it right now. That's like
Hmm,
that's not a quote I think I would pull forward into like the next iteration of the book.
interesting.
Yeah.
Um, if you're okay with it, like I like to shift gears a little bit because not only are you about Whole30 and lifestyle choices and self experimentation, but you're running a business. You're a founder slash CEO of a business. And that's normally the type of person I have on the show. But given the fact of your expertise, I wanted to tap into that. And I still want to tap more into that. I like to talk kind of business things for a little bit here, if you're okay with it. And
Yeah, cool.
what starting out is when you think about leaders in your life who have sustained excellence over an extended period of time, what have you found to be some of the common behaviors or virtues of those people?
The first one is something I say all the time. The best leaders, I think, pay themselves first.
Hmm.
It was something that I learned the hard way when I first started running my business and thought that in order to be a good entrepreneur, I had to run myself into the ground. In order to run a health company, I had to make myself as unhealthy as possible in the name of serving my community and my audience, and quickly realized how unsustainable and kind of unhealthy that was. So, the leaders I've seen who are in it for the long haul and do the most good for a good length of time prioritize their own care and their own work-life balance and their own interests and health. They're not afraid to take mental health days. They're not afraid to take, use their vacation days. They're modeling that for their employees, encouraging their team to do the same. So that's a really big one for me, is I do think about paying myself first.
What are some other ones that you found that you learned, like whether they're mentors or colleagues or
Hmm.
coaches or friends, people that have been in your life that you're like, ooh, that's
Hmm.
something I'm going to take. That's something I can jot down as a note of this seems like excellence to me from a leadership perspective.
Yeah, I had a professor in college. So I went back to college after my recovery for business. And I had a professor, Jack McCarthy, who was like on loan to the University of New Hampshire from, I think, Boston College School of Business. And he taught me that the best communicators, the most effective communicators, are the ones who speak to people the way they want to be spoken to.
Mm.
And it was a really interesting lesson for me because at the time I was going to school full time while also working full time, and I was managing a group of about 15 people. And I was able to put into practice what I was learning in school in the office. And I remember I had this one employee who I was just butting heads with all the time. It was like my approach was not working. And one day I just changed my approach and I realized that if I approached her with the like, hey, I need you to do this for me, it was like just, she just didn't want any piece of it. But if I approached her with, hey, I'm struggling to figure out how to put this together, and you're really, really good at organization, do you think that you could help me with this? It would be like a huge favor. She was all up in it. And it made me realize that as long as I was willing to flex my personality and put my own ego aside, I would be a much more effective leader because I would speak to people the way they wanted to be spoken to and effectively get the job done. And that was a huge lesson that comes in super handy now, talking to millions of people through the Whole30.
So you're also in a position to hire people. You have a
Mhm.
team. You have to make these really important choices on who to bring a part of the team. What are some of the must-have qualities or attributes in a person for them for you? I mean, obviously they have to do the specific role. I understand like skills are needed because if this person has a role as a finance person and they're a salesperson, they might have different skill sets. I get that part of it. I'm talking like core value type things. What are some of the must-have qualities or attributes in a person for you to say, yeah, I want them on the team?
Yeah, so I definitely have learned along the way, going back very far before Whole30, to hire for talent and not skill. You can teach
Mm.
someone the skills, but you can't necessarily teach the talent. my team right now is relatively small. I think we have like 18 full-time employees. So it's not huge, which means that every single person I bring in like really has an impact. You're not just a nameless, faceless person in the crowd. So I'm very, very careful about our hiring practices. I think the first thing I look for is a real entrepreneurial spirit. We are a small team. We do run lean. And I want people to take ownership of not only their job, but like the program as a whole, the community as a whole. I can say that every single person who works with me feels as though they are Whole30 and they represent the brand and they represent the community and they take that really seriously. I like people who are ambitious and who want to grow and learn in their role and who are willing to, step up and say like, hey, I'm not doing this right now, but I would really like to, those kinds of things, because we are so small and nimble, we can move people where they want to go. And if this just happened recently, someone had kind of a hidden talent that we didn't realize. And when they started working in that capacity, we were all blown away. And then it was a quick conversation. Hey, we want to move you into this area because you're real good at it. Do you want to do that? And they said yes. And there they are. So I love that. It's also really important to me that everyone on my team buys into the diversity, equity, and inclusion values that we hold at Whole30. That's a huge part of running our business. It's a huge part of our strategic planning. We infuse those DEI values into absolutely everything we do. So it's very important that anyone we bring on really sees why that's mission critical for the success of our program and our brand, and is just as enthusiastic about upholding those and learning as we are.
Interesting. One of the other things about you as a leader is you'll post pictures of an imperfect body, right? They're not airbrushed. It shows like a part of your body that's not as flattering as other parts. I've seen you be willing to do this and kind of, I think, another way of showing courage and of saying go first, of not showing other people like, while there are probably pictures you see of me that look flawless and perfect, here are some others that are not. And I think that probably makes people feel a little bit better, quite frankly. I'm curious about your thoughts on that. Again, having the willingness and the courage to say, yeah, you've seen some of these and I look pretty good, but these other ones, look at this. Like I'm just like you in a way that I have to have these same types of things going on with my body.
So it's so interesting. We think that's courageous because of what society has told us about what is beauty and what the standard of beauty is and what we all should be looking to attain. But like, I'm not brave for posting photos of me existing in my body. I just exist in my body, right? And my body looks different, doing different things. And if it's a good picture because I'm enjoying the sunshine and I'm out paddleboarding with my dog, like I'm going to share it. And it's not a strategy. I know that there are others out there and I appreciate them so much because they give so many people courage. Their strategy is I'm going to purposefully share my imperfections, or what I consider, or what society tells you are imperfections.
Yeah.
That's not my strategy at all. I'm not trying to do that. What I am doing is just showing up exactly as I am and exactly as I exist. And it would be awesome if people didn't think that was brave one day, because there was nothing like taboo about a woman showing up exactly as she exists. That would be awesome one day.
It doesn't, but that's not today.
It's not, I mean, it's not, but it is in the circles of people who are actively rejecting diet culture, actively rejecting fat phobia, actively rejecting, some of the patriarchal and misogynistic standards that are enforced upon all of us, right? There's a huge cohort of women who are like, this is me existing in my body, and like, don't call me brave. And I don't have to put a caption over there that says like, I'm proud of who I am. Like, this is literally me existing, and I want this to become normalized.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
I hope it does. I
Me
really
too.
like that. Another thing a phrase you've used is called gray rock. So there are people out there who may be energy vampires. I've had John Gord on the show. He talks about those. And there are narcissists out there. And I found that you like to gray rock people like that. Can you share what that means?
Yeah, I think everyone has someone like this in their life, whether it's a relative or a coworker or a friend, before you realize how toxic they are, that just sucks the energy out of you, is always complaining, is always gaslighting you, whatever the situation. And the gray rock technique, I didn't invent it. Was of course, created by a psychotherapist, and I'm not really sure who to credit it to, but I learned about it in therapy. And the idea is just to make yourself as kind of boring as possible. What they're looking for in that moment is a reaction, any reaction. And I've dealt with this in some of my own relationships where they're just pushing buttons and they don't care if you're angry or if you laugh or if you cry or if you fight back or if you retreat. All they want to see is a reaction. So by, using really simple sentences like, okay, or yeah, I guess, or not agreeing to anything, being really unemotional about it. If you're texting, maybe you don't have to text back. Not everything deserves a response. By making yourself kind of boring, like a big old gray rock, you're essentially sucking the energy out of the room and you're just not giving them much to feed on.
I think that's a really useful practice, right? You just go about your day. Because usually the response they want is just some sort of probably heightened emotion. And by not having that, I think, because the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference, right? So this is kind of being indifferent to somebody who maybe kind of loves you in a weird way if they're trying to get you going. And I sense that's what gray rocking. I hadn't heard that term, but when I was reading about you, I saw that. Like that, I think that I find that really useful.
Yeah, it's a cool strategy. I've used it before. And, I interact with a lot of people through my work. And of course, I've had many personal relationships in my life. And that's one strategy that has served me pretty well.
What's like your favorite thing about what you get to do day to day? Just thought of that off the top of my head. Like curious,
Yeah.
like what's your, I know every day is different and it seems pretty exciting. But I'm curious, like, what's your favorite thing?
I think like talking to people in my Instagram DMs and like in comments and the emails that they send me, that's my favorite thing. I love hearing people's stories. I love hearing, their sharing of the same experience that I just talked about. I love when they ask me questions. How would you hey, I need help with this boundary. How would you set that? Or, people who tell me like deeply intimate and personal things because they feel like they can trust me enough just by what they know on social media, like that's absolutely hands down. And when I was doing in-person events, which I can't wait to get back to, that was always my favorite part. Getting to meet people in person and hearing their Whole30 story or their personal journey is like the most gratifying part of what I do. I never get tired of hearing their stories.
You talked about boundaries there. Dr. Henry Cloud, I've had him on the show and we talked about boundaries. He's written multiple books about that as well. I know you've been an outspoken advocate of setting clear, defined, and practical boundaries. Can you share more about how, because I think people, I definitely mess this up, but I think people in general can mess this up, whether it's in your personal relationships, working relationship, all relationships. What's your philosophy on boundaries?
Yeah. So I think people, boundaries are one of those like essential life skills, like time management or budgeting that like are not really taught to us. They're not taught in school. Nobody educates you on them in the workplace. They're probably perhaps not modeled for you at home. And very often we learn about them in times of crisis and we have to like pick up the skill on the fly, which is never the best way to like learn or employ a new skill like that. So I think about boundaries in terms of kind of guardrails, setting guidelines around behaviors such that you are safe and healthy, or in some cases, in an effort to make the relationship better. So boundaries aren't about trying to control someone else's behavior. They are about you setting kind of this perimeter, this safety perimeter around your own life such that behavior inside the perimeter is acceptable to you and healthy, and anything that, or outside, and anything that crosses in is unacceptable because it causes harm. So that's generally how I think about boundaries.
Can you share an example or a story about like making that, like how do you actually put that into practice or making it more practical for someone in a relationship, at work, at home, whatever it may be?
Oh yeah, I can give you thousands of examples.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example from my own life. I hang out with my parents a lot, with my son, who's now 8. And while they're generally really good about letting me parent, occasionally they step in and try to over-parent me. And in one of those situations, I said, hey, mom and dad, like I know that you are trying to be helpful here. And also it's my turn to be his parent. So when it comes time to saying yes or no or setting consequences, please allow me to do that. right? That was my boundary, right? I would rather in my presence that you not try to overparent me. And
Mm,
if they respect that, great. And if they don't, then I can remind them, hey, we had this conversation and I'm asking you not to overparent. If you can't do that, we're going to have to change the way we hang out together because it's setting a confusing message for my son. So that's
interesting.
just one like common, that's one. Another boundary example is when your mom insists on commenting on your body over lunch. I've heard this a lot post COVID. I'm not as comfortable in my body. Things have like shifted, and I'm going to lunch with my mom, and I know she's going to say something, and I really don't want her to. And it's like, okay, well, ahead of time, say, hey, mom, I'm feeling a little uncomfortable in my body right now. And I know if you bring it up over lunch, I'm not going to have as good a time. Can we agree not to talk about that when we're at lunch together? That's your boundary. It's something that you really don't want to engage in conversation with.
Yeah.
So, those are just a few examples of common boundaries that you might want to set in your own personal life.
And I feel like this is like, from a leadership perspective, setting vividly clear expectations and also always knowing where you stand, like being upfront, but really useful practice to live this way. Because I don't know about you, Melissa, but I don't like lack of clarity as far as like what somebody's thinking in regards, especially if something's bothering them.
Mhm.
I'd like to know, and I want to do the same for them. And I think leading with that could probably, again, open up great lines of dialogue, whether it's with your mom or it's with somebody at work, by just openly stating that. And so I'm wondering, like at work, how do you do the like from a boundaries perspective? What are some of the conversations you might have with people to make sure you have these? Because I'm guessing you have like really clear expectations, which I think is a leader's role and responsibility to make sure that that's happening. What do you think about that at work?
Oh, yeah. I think so. Boundaries at work are always a little trickier. Anytime you have a power dynamic in play, it can be
Yeah.
tricky to set a boundary. So at work, you've got maybe someone who's your boss. Maybe you have someone who reports to you. Maybe you have someone who isn't your boss, but is like in tighter with your boss than you are. So there's always a little bit of a trickier dynamic. But, what I go back to always what Brene Brown says, which is clear is kind.
Mm,
Clear is kind. And so at work, I might say something like, hey, I'm out of the office tomorrow and I will not be on email. My away message will often say, like, I'm out of the office. I will not be checking email. If this is an emergency, like Oprah wants to talk to me on the phone level emergency, you can text my assistant. Otherwise, I will be responding to email on Tuesday. And please grant me some patience as I work through like a pretty full inbox. So
yeah.
that's one clear, kind boundary I set for myself so that my team knows when they go on vacation, I'm not going to be emailing them and expecting them to respond.
By the way, side note on out of office emails. This is a little bit of a pet peeve, and maybe I shouldn't even say this, but like when you say I'll have limited access
I
to
know.
my email, it's like, well, no, you definitely have access to it. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure there's Wi-Fi and you have a phone. It's that you don't want to do it, which is completely cool. But don't lie. Don't like say, I mean, if you're up in a mountain and there's no service, that's like the only time that you don't. But there's not many places in the world where you actually don't have access. You're choosing maybe to put the phone in the drawer or in your backpack. That's completely fine and you're right. But like telling me that you don't, it's like, come on. Yeah, you do.
I would love to see modeled like people actually taking their damn vacations. Take your
Yeah.
day. I have a whole email about how to actually take a vacation, how to set boundaries with coworkers, with your boss ahead of time, like how to set it up such that you can actually go and take your earned paid time off. Yes, I would.
I'll reply when I get back, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll do my best to reply when I get back, but I
Yeah.
will not be replying, not because you can't, because you're not going to.
No.
I just think that's also just being honest. That's sharing. And you know this, everyone's watching what you do when
Yes.
like whether you are going on vacation, you're taking a day off, it's like Sunday and you're emailing, like you have to think about all those things. Can you share about the responsibility of the leader and how all of your actions, even if you're not really thinking about, oh, it's no big deal, I'm just thinking of this on a Saturday, so I'm going to email my team. But all
Mm-hmm.
of a sudden, Melissa, the founder and CEO, has emailed me now on a Saturday when I was doing something with my family. I got to drop everything to make sure I'm there for her. When for you, it's like, no, it wasn't that big of a deal. I just thought of
Mm-mm.
it, so I sent it. But so I think this could be helpful for leaders. How do you view your actions, your behaviors from a leadership perspective? Because I don't know if enough leaders think about how they're received and how
Oh, yeah.
important to think of it from that perspective is.
Oh, yeah. Your entire company culture trickles down from you. It
Yeah.
most certainly does. And if your behaviors aren't matching your words, then obviously your behaviors are going to speak louder. So there is a send later button. So just send it later. You can schedule things on Slack now. You can schedule things on email. I am friends with people on my team, but I don't send text messages on the weekend, even if it's just a friendly, like, oh, I loved your hike this weekend, because I think they're going to see a message from me and probably freak out. I'm very conscientious about how I communicate with my team. And I make sure that not only am I modeling the behavior that I want them to feel empowered to also bring into the workplace, but that I'm not asking something of them with my actions and kind of saying things that are in opposition.
Yeah. I think it's a big part that I know I have messed that up multiple times, where it was just top of mind. So I just fired it off, and it happened to be a bad time. And then people like drop everything, or no, I didn't mean you to do that. And you're like, but dude,
Mhm.
I report to you. And so I
Yeah, you're the
felt like,
boss. Mhm.
yeah. And
Yeah.
and then I'm like, oh God, that's on me. That's on me. I think it's something for leaders to think about. Like,
Yeah.
you're the emotional thermostat, but you also are setting kind of this is how we're going to operate, and just be cognizant of that part.
Yep.
Melissa, I'm curious, what, like business wise, what are you most excited about in the near and long-term future of your business?
I think I'm the most excited about handing over big chunks of my business to someone else right now.
Really?
I'm
Like
Yeah.
sell the business,
No, no, no,
or
no, 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 no,
oh,
no. The day-to-day operations. So,
hmm,
I've been running Whole30 for 12 years, and I'm both, managing the day-to-day operations of every aspect of the business, but I'm also the face. I'm the person who writes the books and does the media and does the videos, and I do the speaking engagements, and it's really challenging to do both. And I add value here being the face and the voice and the North Star and the connection. And I'm at a point where our business is successful enough that I'm not necessarily adding value on the day-to-day operations and the big picture strategy and the vision. So I'm actually, having some great discussions with my team right now about how I can offload some of that day-to-day responsibility and maybe bring others in, or elevate someone currently on my team to do that, so I can have more time and capacity to do the things that I both love and where I add significant value. So that's a
huh,
conversation that's been a long time coming, but I'm really excited about that.
cool. Do you own 100% of the business?
I do. Yeah, we're
Wow.
self-funded, always been self-funded since day one. Some of my employees have equity, but yeah, it's just us.
Do you anticipate staying that way, or or it's hard to know?
Um, we've talked to investors before, certainly, and the idea of raising money is like something we've kicked around.
Mhm.
I think at this point, we're probably not going to head in that direction, not yet anyway. We don't necessarily need the money. And I think that we have some great business strategies in play. We just launched a line of CPG. We launched our own line of salad dressings in January, and those are really starting to take off now that COVID has stopped kind of messing with our manufacturing so much. So I think we have a lot of things in play, and the company's value is only going to continue to grow over the next few years. And I just don't really see a need to give away any piece of that just yet.
How do you think you best learned to be an effective CEO? There's not much like CEO school. I know the most impactful way is to actually do it, but like I'm curious about whether it's books, articles, mentors, resources. Like, what was out there that helped you learn to be an effective CEO?
I don't know. That's a weird question because I've
Yeah,
only just like done it, right? It
yeah,
was just me and one other person for a long time. And then we kind of just started growing. And definitely mentors. I've had some mentors both in school and in my last job. My 9 to 5 job that I worked for 10 years was in an insurance company. I managed a big group of people. I had an amazing boss named Tom who really, mentored me, and he was fantastic. So definitely at work. A lot of it is just kind of figuring it out as you go, right?
yeah.
I definitely I've read a lot of books on leadership, and I enjoy, Harvard Business Reviews and talking to people. I have a lot of friends who are business owners, and we do these little mini masterminds whenever we get together and talk shop. And I think that's great. But I don't know. I I have definitely figured it out as I've gone. I've surrounded myself with incredibly talented people. I've hired so many people who are so much better than I am at what they do. And I think that's huge.
Mhm.
My team certainly gets so much credit. And I think I also know enough to know what I'm not good at and make sure that I fill those roles so the company continues to grow.
I, I sense a very high level of self-awareness and emotional intelligence. I don't take that for granted, like meaning I think that's unfortunately rare, but I feel like you possess those skills. What have you done to become more self-aware and more emotionally intelligent? Because again, I sense really high levels of those from you, just in how you respond and how you converse, how we've talked both on and off mic. What are some ways that you've worked on building those skills?
Lots of therapy, lots and lots of therapy, being
Mhm.
willing to like unpack my own crap and take a look at it and toss it around and talk to others about it. A lot of self-experimentation, which is like where we started the conversation, but I do tons of self-experimentation, usually in the name of wellness. So everything from cold showers to talking to strangers to my warm food experiment to like rucking, which is I'm kind of in the middle of now, to the Whole30. I do these fun little self experiments to try to better myself, to try to sort of learn more about myself and what does and what doesn't work for me. And so that's been a huge part, I think. And then I think I'm really committed to working on my empathy. I don't think that's a feeling or an emotion that's come naturally to me. It's something I've had to work very hard at. And I started with showing myself empathy, and that just naturally kind of allowed me to be more empathetic with others. But that's like a really big effort that I'm still continuing to this day, is trying to figure out what it's like to be in other people's shoes, people's experiences in the world who don't have the same privilege that I do, and try to learn more about their experience.
There's somebody right now, Melissa, who's maybe a recent college graduate within the last few years. They're not 100% sure yet what they want to do with their life, but they are certain that they want to leave a dent in the world. They want to impact people in a positive way. They want people to think about them. Oh, they're what a quality person there. They're doing good work. What are some general pieces of life slash career advice you would give to that person?
I'm not going to say follow your passion. That's so easy for someone to say who already is living their passion. I feel like that's kind of like mostly BS advice, often given from people who aren't necessarily aware of their own privilege. But I think in whatever job that you do, like do it really well, own that job really well. I'm a huge fan of over
Mhm.
deliver in absolutely everything you do. So that's one way, I think, of making a name for yourself, making yourself as known as like the person who like will do that, who will go the extra mile, who will think about over delivering. I mean, it's so basic, but like be kind to people, be willing, and open to trusting other people, be willing to kind of be the one to go first and be a little bit vulnerable, and be the kind of person such that everyone says about you like, no, they'll get it done. They're always nice about it, they're always helpful, not to the point where obviously you're like taking too much BS from coworkers. That's not the thing I'm talking about, but there's just something to be said for that person that's just such a go-to. You just know that you can trust them, you can count on them, they're going to think 10 steps ahead, and they're going to have your back. And that's really who I look for when I think about people I want on my team.
Love it. Thank you so much, Melissa. Where would you send my viewers and listeners to learn more about you online?
Yeah, so my website is melissau.com, and my Instagram handle is the same, at melissau. And you can find everything Whole30 at whole and the number 30.
So good. Well, I really appreciate how giving you were of your wisdom, and I would absolutely love to continue our dialogue as we both progress. It'd be great to meet you in person at some point.
Yeah, that would be awesome, Ryan. Thank you so much. It was a great conversation.
Awesome. Thanks so much.